The rain hammered against the windows of the small house on Maple Street like 1,000 angry fists. It was the kind of November storm that makes you grateful for a roof over your head, the kind that turns streets into rivers and sends tree branches crashing onto power lines. In the modest neighborhood of Riverside, Pennsylvania, most families had already locked their doors and settled in for the night, but Angela Pierce was still awake. She sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by bills she couldn't pay, and a calculator that kept showing numbers she didn't want to see. The fluorescent light above her flickered. It had been doing that for weeks, but fixing it wasn't a priority when rent was due in 3 days. Her eyes burned from exhaustion. She'd just finished a double shift at the diner downtown, then rushed to her evening cleaning job at the medical center. Her hands smelled like bleach and French fries, an odd combination that had become her signature scent. In the next room, her 7-year-old son Marcus slept peacefully, his small chest rising and falling in rhythm. He was the reason she pushed through every impossible day, the reason she smiled when her feet screamed in pain, the reason she never, ever gave up. Angela rubbed her temples and glanced at the clock. 2:47 a.m. She should sleep. Tomorrow would bring another double shift, another day of survival. Then came the sound. At first she thought it was thunder, but it came again, heavy, desperate, rhythmic. Someone was pounding on her front door. Angela's heart jumped into her throat. Nobody knocked on doors at this hour with good intentions. Not in this neighborhood. Not in this economy. She stood slowly, her chair scraping against the worn linoleum floor. Through the rain-streaked window she could barely make out a figure on her porch, a large shadow swaying like a tree about to fall. She moved closer to the door, her hand trembling as she reached for the chain lock. "Who's there?" Her voice was stronger than she felt. The pounding stopped. Then, barely audible over the storm, came a single word that would change everything. "Please." It wasn't a demand. It wasn't a threat. It was pure, raw desperation. The sound of someone at the absolute end of their rope. Angela knew that sound. She'd made it herself, silently. 100 times in the past 3 years since Marcus's father had walked out and never looked back. Against every instinct screaming at her to stay safe, to protect her son, to not open that door. She unlocked it. The man collapsed forward the moment the door swung open. Angela caught him instinctively, his weight nearly bringing her down. He was massive, at least 6'3", built like someone who'd spent years in the gym. His expensive suit was torn and soaked through with a mixture of rain and something darker. Blood. His face was a mess. One eye was swollen shut, his lip was split, and a deep gash ran along his left temple. But what struck Angela most were his eyes. Dark, intense, and filled with something she couldn't quite name. Not fear. Something deeper. Resignation, maybe. Or surprise that someone had actually opened the door. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his Italian accent thick even through the pain. "I had nowhere else." He passed out before finishing the sentence. For 5 full seconds, Angela stood there with an unconscious stranger half collapsed in her doorway, the storm raging behind him, reality catching up with what she'd just done. Then her nursing assistant training kicked in. Those 2 semesters at community college before Marcus was born, before money ran out, before life got in the way. She dragged him inside with strength she didn't know she had, kicked the door shut and locked it. The man left a trail of water and blood across her floor. She laid him on the couch, her only couch, the one she'd bought used for $60 and covered with a blanket to hide the stains. "Marcus stays asleep," she whispered to herself like a prayer. "Please, let Marcus stay asleep." She ran to the bathroom and grabbed her first aid kit, a plastic box filled with Band-Aids, hydrogen peroxide, and gauze she'd been collecting from work. It wasn't much, but it was something. She returned to find the stranger still unconscious, his breathing shallow but steady. Angela worked quickly. She cut away his shirt, expensive fabric she noticed, probably worth more than her entire wardrobe, and revealed more injuries. Bruises blooming purple and black across his ribs, cuts that looked intentional, methodical. This wasn't a random mugging. Someone had done this deliberately. She cleaned the wounds as best she could, her hands surprisingly steady. The gash on his temple would probably need stitches, but she couldn't exactly take him to a hospital. Too many questions. And something told her that questions were the last thing this man needed. As she worked, she studied his face. Even battered and bruised, there was something striking about him. Strong jawline, dark stubble, features that suggested Mediterranean heritage. His hands were interesting, too. calloused and scarred but with manicured nails. A strange combination. Around his neck hung a thick gold chain with a pendant she couldn't quite make out in the dim light. On his wrist, a watch that probably cost more than her car. Whoever this man was, he had money. Or had it at some point. Angela finished bandaging the worst of his wounds and covered him with her only spare blanket. She sat back on her heels, suddenly aware of what she'd done. There was a bleeding stranger on her couch. A man who could be anyone. A criminal, maybe. Someone dangerous. But when she looked at his face, relaxed now in unconsciousness, she saw something else. Someone's son. Someone's brother, perhaps. Someone who, despite the expensive clothes and gold jewelry, had been beaten within an inch of his life and had nowhere else to turn but a stranger's door. "What have I done?" she whispered to the empty room. The stranger didn't answer. Outside, the storm continued to rage, and Angela Pierce, exhausted single mother of one, sat on her floor next to a man she didn't know, hoping she hadn't just made the biggest mistake of her life. She must have dozed off there on the floor, because when her eyes opened, pale gray light was filtering through the curtains. The storm had passed. The house was quiet except for Marcus's soft snoring from the bedroom, and from somewhere outside a sound that didn't belong. Engines. Lots of them. Angela's eyes snapped to the stranger on her couch. He was awake now, staring at the ceiling with those intense dark eyes. When he heard the engines too, his expression changed, not to fear, but to something like inevitability. "They found me," he said quietly, his accent even more pronounced now. "I am sorry. You should not be involved in this." "Who found you?" Angela stood, her heart racing. "Who are you?" Before he could answer, the sound of the engines grew louder. Impossibly loud. Like an army approaching. Angela moved to the window and pulled back the curtain. Her breath caught in her throat. What could possibly happen next? Drop a comment with your prediction, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because Chapter 2 is going to blow your mind. Trust me. You won't believe what Angela sees outside her window. The street was gone. That's the first thought that hit Angela's mind as she stared through her window. Maple Street, the quiet tree-lined road where kids rode bikes and neighbors waved from porches, had vanished beneath a sea of black metal and tinted glass. SUVs. Hundreds of them, maybe more. They lined both sides of the street in perfect formation, so precise it looked military. Black Escalades, Suburbans, Range Rovers, all spotless despite the storm, all identical in their dark perfection. They stretched as far as she could see in both directions, disappearing around the corner where the street met Jefferson Avenue. But what made Angela's blood run cold wasn't the number of vehicles. It was the silence. No doors opening, no engines cutting off. Just this low, rumbling idle. Hundreds of engines purring in perfect synchronization like some massive mechanical beast waiting for a signal to strike. "Oh my God," Angela breathed. Her hand was pressed against the window, leaving a small fog of condensation. "Oh my God, what is this?" Behind her, she heard the stranger rise from the couch. His movements were slow, painful, but deliberate. When she turned to look at him, she barely recognized the broken man from last night. He stood tall now. Incredibly tall, she realized, having to look up to meet his eyes. The swelling had gone down enough that she could see his full face. Strong, commanding, the kind of face you'd see on a statue in Rome. And his eyes. They weren't desperate anymore. They were calculating, assessing. He walked to the window, moving past her to look outside. And when he saw the army of SUVs, he didn't look surprised. He looked resigned, maybe even a little sad. "You need to wake your son," he said quietly. "Get him dressed. Now." "Excuse me." Angela's fear was turning into anger. "You need to tell me what's happening right now. Who are you? Who are all these—" A knock at the door interrupted her. Not the desperate pounding from last night. This was controlled. Professional. 3 precise knocks that somehow carried more weight than a battering ram. The stranger turned to her, and for the first time she saw something like respect in his eyes. "You saved my life last night. I will never forget that, but I need you to trust me now. Wake your son, stay calm, and let me handle this." "Handle what?" Angela's voice was rising despite herself. "There are hundreds of men outside my house. I have a child. I need to call the police." "The police cannot help you now." He said it simply, factually. "Please, trust me." Another knock. Same rhythm. Same pressure. But somehow more insistent. Angela's mind raced. She thought about Marcus asleep in his room, about the bills on her kitchen table, about her normal, difficult, but ultimately safe life that seemed to be crumbling with every second. But she also thought about how this man had looked last night, broken, bleeding, vulnerable, how he'd whispered please like it was the last word he'd ever say. 5 minutes, she said. You have 5 minutes to explain this. I cannot, but I promise you, neither you nor your son will be harmed. You have my word. The word of a stranger means nothing. Then you will have to trust my actions. He moved toward the door. Wait. Angela grabbed his arm. He looked down at her hand on his sleeve, then up at her face. You're hurt. You can barely stand. How can you? Angela. The way he said her name, and he must have heard it when she was talking to herself last night, made her stop. I am many things. Weak is not one of them. Not anymore. He gently removed her hand from his arm and walked to the door. Angela stood frozen, watching as he reached for the handle. Her entire body screamed at her to grab Marcus and run out the back door. But something deeper, instinct, intuition, or maybe just exhaustion, kept her rooted in place. The stranger opened the door. 3 men stood on her porch. They wore black suits that probably cost more than Angela's car, dark sunglasses despite the overcast morning, earpieces with coiled wires disappearing into their collars. They looked like Secret Service agents, but somehow more dangerous, more real. The man in the center was older, maybe 60, with silver hair slicked back and a face carved from granite. When he saw the stranger, his expression didn't change, but his posture did. He straightened, his shoulders went back, and then he did something that made Angela's world tilt on its axis. He took off his sunglasses and bowed his head. Don Lorenzo, the silver-haired man said, his voice carrying a thick Brooklyn accent mixed with Italian. Thank God. We've been searching all night. We feared. I am alive, Marco. The stranger, Lorenzo, spoke with an authority that transformed him completely. This wasn't the desperate man from last night. This was someone else. Someone powerful. Because of this woman. Marco's eyes shifted to Angela for the first time. She felt pinned under his gaze like an insect under glass. Then he looked back at Lorenzo and said something in rapid Italian that Angela couldn't follow. Lorenzo responded in English. She asks no questions because I have given her no answers. She deserves them. Tell me, how many? 347 vehicles, Marco replied. Every family sent representatives, every captain, every soldier who could be spared. The moment word spread that you were missing, they mobilized. Philadelphia, New York, Boston, Chicago, even California sent men. Angela's hand went to her mouth. 347 vehicles. That meant she couldn't even calculate how many men were outside her house right now. They should not have come, Lorenzo said, but there was something in his voice. Emotion. This is not their fight. With respect, Don Lorenzo, the moment they touched you, it became everyone's fight. Marco's voice was steel. The families are united on this. What was done to you was an insult to all of us. Lorenzo was quiet for a moment, then, bring me Salvatore and Carlo. I need to... Mommy? Angela's heart stopped. She spun around to see Marcus standing in the hallway, rubbing his eyes. He wore his dinosaur pajamas, the ones with a hole in the knee that she kept meaning to sew. His hair stuck up in every direction. He looked so small, so vulnerable. Baby, go back to your room. But Marcus was staring past her, out the open door, his eyes growing wider. Mommy, why are there so many cars? Lorenzo turned. When he saw Marcus, something in his face softened. He lowered himself to one knee. Angela could see the pain it cost him, so he was at Marcus's eye level. Buongiorno, young man, Lorenzo said gently. You have a very brave mother. She is like a superhero, yes? Helping people who need help. Marcus looked at the stranger, then at his mother, then back. Are you a bad guy? Angela held her breath. Lorenzo smiled, a real smile that transformed his face entirely. I have done bad things, but your mother showed me that good people still exist, so maybe I can try to be less bad. What do you think? Marcus considered this with the seriousness only a 7-year-old could manage. I think you should say sorry for the bad things. You are right, and I will. Lorenzo looked up at Angela. Starting now. He stood, wincing slightly, and turned to Marco. I want 50 men to stay. Establish a perimeter, 2 blocks in every direction. The rest return to their territories. This neighborhood has seen enough strangeness for one morning. Don Lorenzo, with respect, your safety is not negotiable, but neither is the comfort of these families. This is a residential area. There are children here, schools nearby. We do not bring this world to their doorstep. His voice carried absolute authority. Send everyone home, make it clear. This woman and her son are under my personal protection. Anyone who harms them, threatens them, or even makes them uncomfortable answers to me directly. Capiche? Marco nodded once. It will be done. And Marco, find out who did this. Not just the soldiers who grabbed me. I want the one who gave the order. The one who thought they could touch me and live. We already know, Don Lorenzo. It was... Lorenzo held up a hand. Later. Right now I need a doctor, and this woman needs answers. Marco disappeared down the porch steps. Within seconds, the rumbling outside changed pitch. Engines were starting to move. Angela watched through her window as the sea of black SUVs began to recede like a strange tide going out. But they didn't all leave. True to Lorenzo's word, at least a dozen remained, positioning themselves strategically around the block. Her neighbors were starting to emerge from their houses now, standing on porches and lawns, staring at the spectacle. Mrs. Chen from across the street had her phone out recording. Mr. Jackson was shouting something Angela couldn't hear. This was going to be all over the neighborhood by noon. All over social media by dinner. Angela's quiet life was officially over. I need to sit down, she said faintly. Lorenzo guided her to the couch, her couch, in her house. But somehow he made it feel like he was the one in control. Marcus had climbed into her lap, his small arms wrapped around her neck. You're scared, Piccolo, Lorenzo said to Marcus. That is good. Smart children are careful. But I promise you, no one here will hurt you. Or your mother. Not ever. Why? Angela found her voice. Why are you doing this? I don't even know who you are. Not really. Lorenzo was quiet for a long moment. Outside, car doors were closing. Men in suits were taking up positions on the street. The morning sun was breaking through the clouds, casting everything in surreal golden light. 23 years ago, Lorenzo finally said, I came to America with nothing. An immigrant from Sicily, barely speaking English, with enemies following me across the ocean. I was hungry, desperate, dangerous, and an old woman in Brooklyn, Mrs. Rosario, may she rest in peace, gave me food when no one else would. She asked no questions, expected nothing in return, just kindness. He touched the bandage on his temple, the one Angela had placed there. I never forgot that, never. When I had power, I made sure she never wanted for anything. Her children went to college. Her grandchildren had opportunities. All because she showed compassion to a stranger. He met Angela's eyes. You did the same, and I am a man of honor, even if I am not a good man. From this moment you are under my protection. You and your son, no one touches you ever. Who are you? Angela whispered. My name is Lorenzo Vitale, and I am the head of the largest crime family on the East Coast. The truth is out. But Angela's nightmare, or is it a blessing, is just beginning. What would you do in her situation? Comment below, and make sure you're subscribed because Chapter 3 reveals the impossible choice Angela has to make. You won't want to miss this. The words hung in the air like smoke from a gun. Lorenzo Vitale. The name meant nothing to Angela at first. Just sounds, syllables, a confession wrapped in an Italian accent. But then Marcus stirred in her lap and reality crashed back in. The most dangerous man on the East Coast was standing in her living room, and she had bandaged his wounds. I need you to leave. Angela's voice was barely above a whisper. Right now, get out of my house. Lorenzo didn't move. His dark eyes studied her face with an intensity that made her want to look away, but she forced herself to hold his gaze. She'd survived Marcus's father leaving, survived being 19 and pregnant and alone, survived 2 jobs and no sleep and bills that never stopped coming. She could survive this. I understand your fear, Lorenzo began. You don't understand anything. Angela stood, lifting Marcus with her. The boy wrapped his legs around her waist instinctively. You came here bleeding. I helped because that's what decent people do. But that doesn't give you the right to bring your world into my home. We're not part of this, we're not. You became part of this the moment you opened that door. Lorenzo's voice wasn't threatening. It was sad, tired. I did not want this for you. But those SUVs, those men, they didn't come because I ordered them. They came because word spread through the families that I had been taken, beaten, left for dead. And when word spreads that a single mother in Riverside took me in, saved my life." He paused. "There are people who will see that as a weakness to exploit. Do you understand what I am saying?" Angela felt cold. "You're saying I'm in danger because I helped you. I am saying you were already in danger the moment I knocked on your door. There is no going back, no undoing this." He gestured to the window, where men in dark suits were visible on the street. "But what I can do, what I will do, is ensure that danger never touches you. You saved my life. I will spend the rest of mine protecting yours. I don't want your protection. I want my normal life back. That life is gone." Lorenzo said it gently but with finality. "By tomorrow, every family from Boston to Miami will know your name. They will know what you did. Some will respect you for it. Others—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Marcus started crying softly against Angela's neck. The sound broke her heart. She'd worked so hard to give him a safe, stable life. She'd sacrificed everything. Her education, her dreams, her youth, to keep him away from the darkness of the world. And in one night, because she'd been too kind or too stupid or too tired to think clearly, she'd invited that darkness right through her front door. Hey, baby, it's okay." Angela bounced Marcus gently, using the same motion she'd used when he was an infant. Everything's okay. But it wasn't okay. Nothing was okay. A knock at the door made her jump. One of the suited men stepped inside without waiting for permission. "Don Lorenzo, the doctor, is here, and Salvatore wishes to brief you on the situation. Tell Salvatore I will speak with him shortly. And have the doctor wait. I need another moment here." Lorenzo never took his eyes off Angela. The man nodded and retreated, closing the door behind him. Lorenzo moved slowly to the kitchen table, where Angela's bills were still scattered. He picked up the electric bill, 3 months overdue, stamped with red letters threatening disconnection. "Put that down." Angela's voice was sharp. "That's private. You are drowning." Lorenzo set the bill down carefully. "Working yourself to death for pennies while your son grows up without his mother because she is too exhausted to be present. This is not judgment. This is observation. I know what poverty looks like. I lived it. We're not poor, we're just—" Angela trailed off. What was the point in lying? "We're surviving. That's enough." "Is it?" Lorenzo gestured to Marcus, who had stopped crying but kept his face buried in his mother's shoulder. "Is this the childhood you imagined for him? Moving from crisis to crisis? One missed payment away from disaster? Don't you dare!" Angela's eyes flashed. "Don't you dare judge how I raise my son. I'm doing the best I can with what I have, which is more than his father did, more than anyone did. We don't need your blood money. It is not about money." Lorenzo's voice rose slightly, the first real emotion she'd heard from him. "It is about respect, gratitude, honor. You gave me something precious last night. My life. In my world, that creates a debt that can never be fully repaid. But I can try. Let me try. By what? Making me complicit in whatever crimes you commit. By ensuring you never worry about rent again. That your son goes to the best schools. That when he is sick you can afford doctors. That you can sleep at night knowing you are safe." Lorenzo leaned against the table and Angela could see the pain from his injuries catching up with him. "I am not asking you to join my family. I am not asking you to do anything illegal. I am simply saying, you are protected now. And whether you like it or not, that protection comes with certain benefits." Angela wanted to scream. She wanted to tell him to take his protection and his benefits and his world of violence and get out. But a treacherous part of her mind was calculating. The electric bill, the rent, the notice from Marcus's school about the field trip she couldn't afford, the hole in the roof that leaked every time it rained, the car that needed new brakes, the endless, crushing weight of trying to survive with no help and no hope. "What do you want from me?" she asked finally. "Nothing. I want you to accept my gratitude. That is all. People like you don't do something for nothing." Lorenzo smiled sadly. "You are right to be suspicious, but in this case your suspicion is misplaced. I do not need anything from you, Angela. I have money. I have power. I have soldiers who would die for me. But last night, when I was beaten and broken and left in an alley to die, none of that mattered. What mattered was that a tired, frightened woman opened her door and showed compassion. That is worth more than any payment I could offer." A commotion outside drew their attention. Through the window, Angela could see a sleek black Mercedes pulling up. An older man in an expensive suit emerged, carrying a leather medical bag. More men flanked him, forming a protective corridor from car to house. "That is Dr. Castellano," Lorenzo said. "He will check my injuries. And then, if you permit, he will examine you and Marcus, free of charge. After that I will leave and give you time to process this. But my men will remain outside, for your protection." "What if I call the police?" Angela asked, already knowing the answer. "The police will come, they will take statements, they will investigate, and they will find nothing they can use." Lorenzo's voice was matter-of-fact. "My lawyers are better than theirs. My reach is longer. And frankly, Angela, what would you tell them? That I broke into your home? That I threatened you?" He gestured to his bandaged wounds. "The evidence tells a different story. It tells of a woman who showed mercy to someone in need. He was right. She hated that he was right, but he was." "Doctor." Castellano knocked and entered. He was perhaps 70, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He nodded respectfully to Angela before turning to Lorenzo and launching into rapid Italian. Lorenzo responded in kind, his voice taking on a different quality, more authoritative, more commanding. The doctor examined Lorenzo there in the living room, his skilled hands probing the injuries with practiced efficiency. He tisked and muttered in Italian, occasionally asking questions that Lorenzo answered with single words. The whole examination took maybe 5 minutes. When it was done, Dr. Castellano turned to Angela. "Signora," he said in heavily accented English, "Don Lorenzo tells me you are the one who cleaned and bandaged his wounds. You have medical training? 2 semesters of nursing school, years ago. You probably saved his life. The head wound especially. Much more bleeding and—" He made a gesture that needed no translation. "You did good work. Very good." "Thank you," Angela said automatically. "Now, if you permit, I would like to examine you and the young man. Don Lorenzo is concerned that his presence here may have caused stress." "We're fine. Please." Dr. Castellano's voice was gentle. "Humor an old man. It will take 5 minutes, and it will make Don Lorenzo happy, which, between you and me, is very good for my continued employment." He smiled, and despite everything, Angela found herself warming to him. "Okay, 5 minutes." Marcus was checked first. Blood pressure, heartbeat, reflexes. The doctor was wonderful with children, making funny faces and producing a lollipop from seemingly nowhere. Marcus giggled, the first happy sound Angela had heard from him all morning. Then it was her turn. As the doctor took her blood pressure, he spoke quietly. "Your numbers are not good, Signora. You are exhausted, stressed. When is the last time you slept a full night?" "I don't remember. This is not sustainable. You cannot pour from an empty cup, yes? You must take care of yourself to take care of your son." He scribbled something on a prescription pad. "This is for vitamins. And this," he wrote another note, "is for a colleague of mine. A therapist. Someone you can talk to about the stress. I can't afford—" "Already paid for. By Don Lorenzo." The doctor met her eyes. "I know what you are thinking. But sometimes, Signora, we must accept help, even from unexpected sources. Pride is a luxury the exhausted cannot afford." He packed his bag and spoke briefly to Lorenzo in Italian before leaving. The room felt suddenly empty with just the 3 of them again. "I need to go," Lorenzo said. "Salvatore is waiting, and there are matters I must attend to. But before I do," he pulled a card from his pocket and set it on the table. "This is a number, my personal line. If you need anything at all, you call. Day or night. If you feel unsafe, if Marcus needs something, if you simply need someone to talk to, you call. Capisci?" Angela stared at the card. Simple, cream-colored paper. A phone number, nothing else. "I won't call. You might, and that is okay." Lorenzo moved to the door, then paused. "One more thing. There will be men outside for the next few days, maybe longer. They will be discreet, but they will be there. They are not here to spy on you or control you. They are here to ensure your safety. Try to live your normal life. Go to work. Take Marcus to school. Do what you would normally do. The only difference is that you will never be alone. You will never be unsafe. That doesn't sound like freedom. It is not, but it is better than the alternative." Lorenzo opened the door. Morning sun streamed in, painting everything gold. "Thank you, Angela Pierce, for showing me that humanity still exists. I will not forget." And then he was gone, moving down the porch steps with surprising grace for someone so injured. The men outside snapped to attention, Car doors opened and closed. Engines started. Within minutes, most of the vehicles had dispersed, leaving only a few strategically positioned around the block. Angela stood in her doorway, holding Marcus, watching the most dangerous man she'd ever met drive away in a convoy of black SUVs. Her neighbors were still outside. Mrs. Chen was definitely recording on her phone. Mr. Jackson was shaking his head in disgust. Kimberly from 2 doors down was texting furiously, probably updating the neighborhood Facebook group. "Mommy?" Marcus's voice was small. "Is that man really bad?" Angela closed the door and locked it. She carried her son to the couch and held him close, breathing in the scent of his strawberry shampoo. "I don't know, baby, I really don't know." On the table, Lorenzo's card sat next to her unpaid bills. And in that moment, Angela realized her life had split into 2 distinct halves. Before she opened the door last night, and after. She could never go back. The question was, how did she move forward? Outside, men in dark suits stood guard over a single mother and her son. Inside, that mother tried to explain to herself how everything had changed in one night. And somewhere in the city, Lorenzo Vitale was making sure that the people who had tried to kill him would never, ever make that mistake again. Angela's life will never be the same. But the biggest revelation is still to come in the final chapter. What happens when the full weight of Lorenzo's protection becomes clear? Drop your thoughts in the comments and make sure you're subscribed. Chapter 4 is going to leave you speechless. 3 days passed before Angela truly understood what Lorenzo's protection meant. The first sign came Monday morning when she arrived at the diner for her shift. Tom, the owner, a gruff 60-year-old who'd spent 30 years flipping eggs and taking no nonsense from anyone, pulled her aside before she could even put on her apron. "Angela, we need to talk." His voice was careful, measured. Her stomach dropped. She knew that tone. "If this is about taking Friday off, I can make up the hours." "It's not about that." Tom rubbed the back of his neck, a gesture she'd seen him make when he was uncomfortable. "Look, you're a good worker. Best I've got, if I'm being honest. But I got a visit yesterday from some men. They said they were making sure you were being treated fairly, that your schedule wasn't too demanding, that I was paying you what you deserve." "Oh, God." Angela felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Tom, I'm so sorry. I didn't ask them to—" "That's not the point." Tom held up a hand. "The point is, these men, and Angela, I've lived in this city long enough to know what kind of men they were. Made it very clear that if anything happened to you, if you were unhappy in any way, they'd consider it a personal insult. Do you understand what I'm saying?" She did. "You're firing me." "I'm not firing you, I'm paying you." Tom pulled an envelope from his apron pocket. "This is for the next 6 months. Full salary, plus a bonus for all the times you covered shifts when no one else would. You don't have to come back. In fact," he looked away, "I'd prefer if you didn't. Not because you did anything wrong, but because I can't have that kind of attention on my business. I got a family too." Angela took the envelope with numb fingers. It was thick, heavy. When she looked inside, her breath caught. More money than she'd make in a year at the diner. "Tom, take it. Consider it severance, or hazard pay, or whatever helps you sleep at night. But Angela, be careful. Men like that don't do favors without expecting something back. And eventually, they always collect." She left the diner in a daze. The envelope felt like it was burning a hole in her purse. Her phone buzzed. A text from the medical center where she worked nights. The manager wanted to meet. Angela already knew how that conversation would go. She was right. By Tuesday afternoon, she'd been let go from her cleaning job too, with a generous severance package, and an apology that couldn't hide the fear in the manager's eyes. In less than a week, Angela had lost both her jobs. But somehow, she had more money in her bank account than she'd seen in years. Wednesday morning brought another surprise. A contractor showed up at her door with plans to fix the leaking roof. When Angela insisted she hadn't called anyone, the man simply smiled and said the work order had been placed by a concerned party. The repairs were already paid for, in full. Thursday, the electric company called to inform her that her outstanding balance had been cleared. Same with the gas company and the water department. All her utilities were paid up for the next year. Friday, Marcus came home from school with a permission slip for a field trip to the Science Museum. The same trip Angela had told him they couldn't afford. But when she looked at the form, someone had already paid his way, along with 10 other students whose families were struggling. By Saturday, Angela was ready to scream. She picked up Lorenzo's card, which she'd been carrying in her wallet all week like a talisman or a curse, she wasn't sure which, and dialed the number. He answered on the second ring. "Angela, is everything all right?" "No, everything is not all right." She tried to keep her voice steady. Marcus was at a friend's house, giving her the freedom to speak openly. "You said you wouldn't interfere with my life. You said I could live normally, but I lost both my jobs. My bills are being paid by mystery sources. There's a new roof on my house that I didn't ask for. This isn't help, Lorenzo. This is control." There was a pause on the other end. Then, "You are right. I apologize. I overstepped." The admission caught her off guard. "What?" "I said you are right. I was trying to help, but I was also trying to, I do not know the word, to make myself feel better about the disruption I caused in your life. It was selfish." He sighed. "Can we meet? Talk in person? I owe you a proper explanation. I don't want to be seen with you. It's already bad enough that half my neighborhood thinks I'm dating a mob boss. Then somewhere private. My office. I will send a car. I can drive myself. Angela, please let me at least ensure you arrive safely. No strings attached. Just a conversation between two people trying to figure out how to move forward." Against her better judgment, she agreed. The car arrived an hour later, a simple black sedan, not the ostentatious SUVs from before. The driver was polite, professional, and said nothing during the 30-minute drive into the city. They pulled up to a building in downtown Philadelphia that Angela had passed 100 times but never really noticed. Brick facade, maybe 10 stories, with the name Vitale Imports in understated brass letters above the entrance. Security waved them through. The lobby was all marble and dark wood, elegant without being flashy. The elevator took her to the 10th floor, where a receptionist, an older woman with kind eyes and a knowing smile, directed her to an office at the end of a long hallway. Lorenzo stood when she entered. He looked different than he had in her living room. His injuries had healed remarkably well, leaving only faint bruises around his eye. He wore a tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than her car, but he'd loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves, making him seem almost approachable. "Thank you for coming." He gestured to a leather chair facing his desk. "Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water?" Answers. Angela sat, crossing her arms. "Starting with why you're destroying my life. I am trying to improve it. By making me unemployed. By making my neighbors suspicious. By paying for things I didn't ask for." She leaned forward. "I had a hard life, Lorenzo. But it was my life. I was surviving, making it work, and you've taken that away from me." Lorenzo sat back in his chair, studying her face. "You are angry?" "I'm furious." "Good. Anger is honest." He poured himself a glass of water from a carafe on his desk. "I will be honest in return. When I left your house last Saturday, I gave orders to ensure your protection, but I also gave orders to make your life easier. I saw those bills on your table. I saw the exhaustion in your eyes. I saw a woman barely holding on, and I thought, I have resources. I have power. Why not use them to help? That's not help. It's arrogant," Lorenzo supplied. "Presumptuous. Perhaps even insulting. You are right. I made decisions about your life without consulting you. In my world, this is normal. We identify problems and solve them. But you are not part of my world, and I should not have treated you as if you were." Angela felt some of her anger deflate. "So what now?" "Now we negotiate. You tell me what you need. Not what I think you need, but what you actually want. And I will do my best to provide it in a way that respects your autonomy." He pulled out a notepad. "So, talk to me. What does Angela Pierce actually need?" She hadn't expected this. The willingness to listen. The absence of ego. "I need..." She paused, thinking. "I need to work. I need to feel like I'm contributing, not just existing on charity." Understandable. What kind of work? "I don't know. My only skills are serving food and cleaning floors. I never finished school. Never got my nursing degree. I'm not qualified for anything better." "That is not true. You have compassion. You have courage. You have excellent instincts under pressure. These are valuable skills." Lorenzo made a note. "What if I told you that several of the businesses I own, legitimate businesses, are always looking for managers, people who understand hard work and treat employees with respect?" "I don't know anything about managing. You managed to keep yourself and your son alive on 2 minimum wage jobs. You can manage a coffee shop or a bookstore." He looked up. These are real positions, Angela. Real businesses that need good people. The pay would be better than the diner. The hours more reasonable. And most importantly, you would earn it. No charity. Just opportunity. She wanted to refuse on principle, but she also thought about Marcus, about the future, about not being exhausted every moment of every day. I'll think about it. That is all I ask. Lorenzo made another note. What else? I want the men outside my house to leave. My neighbors are already suspicious. It's only a matter of time before someone calls the police or the news. Lorenzo was quiet for a moment. I cannot do that. Not yet. Why not? Because the people who tried to kill me last week are still out there, and they know you helped me. As long as there is a threat, my men stay. This is non-negotiable. For how long? Until the threat is eliminated. His voice took on a harder edge, which should be soon. Angela didn't want to know what eliminated meant in his world. Fine, but can they at least be less obvious? Maybe fewer people? Further away? I can arrange that. They talked for another hour. About Marcus's schooling. Lorenzo offered to pay for private school, but Angela insisted on keeping him in public school with his friends, though she agreed to accept help with supplies and activities. About her neighbors, Lorenzo promised to have his men be more discreet and to avoid any confrontations. About the future. No grand promises, just a commitment to respect Angela's choices while honoring the debt Lorenzo felt he owed. As the conversation wound down, Angela found herself relaxing slightly. Lorenzo was still dangerous, still a criminal, still someone she should probably run from. But he was also complicated, more complicated than she'd expected. Can I ask you something? She said as she prepared to leave. Anything. Why does this matter so much to you? I mean, you're powerful, rich. You could just pay me off and forget about me. Why go through all this trouble? Lorenzo looked out his window at the Philadelphia skyline. When I was 16, I watched my father get killed in the streets of Palermo. He was a good man who made bad choices to feed his family. I swore that day I would never be powerless again, that I would build an empire so strong that no one could ever touch me or the people I cared about. He turned back to her. For 30 years, I have kept that promise. I have power beyond what my father could have imagined. But last week I was beaten and left to die, and the only person who helped me was a stranger who had no reason to do so, except that it was the right thing to do. He walked over to stand in front of her. You reminded me why I started this. Not for power, not for money, but to protect people, to ensure that the vulnerable are not left to suffer. You showed me that compassion still exists in this world, and that is a debt I can never fully repay, but I can try. Angela stood. They were close now, and she could see the sincerity in his dark eyes, the scars on his face from that night, the weight of all the choices that had led him to this moment. I'm not a saint, she said quietly. I couldn't leave someone on my doorstep. That's just basic humanity, which is more rare than you think. Lorenzo extended his hand. So, do we have an understanding? I help in ways you find acceptable. You allow me to ensure your safety, and we both move forward. Angela looked at his hand for a long moment. Taking it felt like crossing a line she could never uncross, but she'd crossed that line the moment she opened her door last Friday night. The question was whether she'd move forward with eyes open or stay in denial. She shook his hand. We have an understanding. Good. Lorenzo smiled, a genuine smile that softened his features. Now, let me have my driver take you home. And Angela, thank you for everything. The drive home was quiet. Angela watched the city pass by, her mind churning. She thought about the job offer, about Lorenzo's promise to be less intrusive, about the fact that she'd just negotiated with a mob boss like it was a normal Tuesday. When she arrived home, she noticed the men outside had changed positions. There were fewer of them now, stationed further away. More subtle. You'd have to know what to look for to spot them. Mrs. Chen was in her front yard, watering plants. When she saw Angela, she waved tentatively. Angela waved back. Maybe things could return to some version of normal. Maybe. That night, after Marcus was asleep, Angela sat at her kitchen table with Lorenzo's business card and the job offer he'd emailed to her phone. Manager of a bookstore in downtown Riverside, good salary, benefits, reasonable hours. She could refuse. Find another diner, another cleaning job. Go back to the life of exhaustion and struggle she knew how to navigate. Or she could accept. Take the opportunity. Give Marcus a better life. Tom's words echoed in her mind. Men like that don't do favors without expecting something back. But maybe, just maybe, sometimes people did things simply because they wanted to, because they felt grateful, because they'd seen kindness and wanted to repay it. Angela opened her laptop and typed a response to the job offer. 3 words. I'll take it. She hit send before she could change her mind. Outside, men stood guard in the shadows. Inside, a single mother made a choice that would change her life forever. And somewhere in the city, Lorenzo Vitale received her email and smiled, knowing that sometimes the greatest victories had nothing to do with power or money, but with honoring a debt that could never truly be repaid. 3 months later, Angela stood in her new bookstore watching Marcus help a customer find a book in the children's section. Her son was thriving in his school. Her bank account was stable. Her roof didn't leak. She slept through the night. The men outside had gradually faded away as Lorenzo had promised, though Angela suspected they were never truly gone, just watching from further away, making sure. She'd seen Lorenzo only once since that day in his office. He'd come to the bookstore's opening bringing flowers and a card that read simply, "For new beginnings, LV." He'd stayed for 5 minutes, shook her hand, complimented Marcus's new shoes, and left. Professional, distant, respectful of the boundaries they'd established. Angela still didn't know if she'd made the right choice that stormy Friday night when she'd opened her door, but she knew she'd made a human choice, a compassionate choice, and somehow against all odds, it had led to something resembling peace. Outside, the sun was setting over Riverside. Children played in the street. Neighbors walked their dogs. Life went on, normal and beautiful, and complicated. And Angela Pierce, single mother and unlikely protege of a mob boss, allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, kindness didn't always come with a price. Sometimes it came with a second chance. What an incredible journey. From a stormy night to a second chance at life, Angela's story shows us that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness create the biggest changes. What would you have done in her situation? Would you have opened the door? Would you have accepted Lorenzo's help? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you love this story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because we have more incredible, emotional, life-changing stories coming your way. Remember, sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is show kindness to a stranger. But sometimes, it's the most powerful thing too. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story. Stay safe out there.